Right, guys, life in modern Britain. I'm going to get through this as soon as possible. It's going to be a big one, simply because I just don't have the time at the minute, so I'm doing it all in one. It's going to be a long video, but you can use it and pause and go back and forward as as you will. Apologies, I did want to split them up into sections, but again, I just don't have the time. Okay, so here we go. Key terms you need to know. Make sure you look at this page. Make sure you go over it. Right. So we're looking at valuables and principles of UK. You're really looking at democracy, rule of law, individual liberty, and mutual respect and tolerance. You need to know them because they'll apply them to each question, and think of examples for each. Right, using values. So again, they are done in certain events, like Paralympics, for example, is a big one in individual liberty. Mutual respect and tolerance, about using allowing people from different religions to wear certain clothing when they compete, not banning them. Okay, so modern Britain relates to England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. Citizens of the UK are British, but can also be Welsh, Scottish, and Irish, and English. The makeup of the UK population is different demographics. You've probably guessed where I'm going with this. It's all about identity. So one of the big questions is, how do people identify? Can you have multiple identities? Sorry, I clicked off that. Please go back and have a look at it. But the main thing is, you can have multiple identities, right? I can identify as a man, but also identify as a Liverpool supporter, for example. Just make sure you're applying it. And specifically in the English, Welsh, Irish, and Scottish thing, right? There could potentially be questions about the lack of a British identity these days, and then you can give examples of the rise in independence movements. Okay, so looking at modern Britain, you look at the percentage of how old people are. Well, you've got a big percentage of 25 to 54. It's where the most numbers are. So just keep an eye. Right, and then you've got the immigration coming to this country. So India being the top, got historical ties to India. You've got Nigeria's another one, which is a lot of historical ties, as well as Ireland and Pakistan. Poland's an interesting one. A lot of Poles coming in, but that links as well to like World War II. So again, right, so consensus. So this again, just a little bit more evidence and information you can bring into it when we're looking at identity in this country. And certainly, like, you might get an identity about the lack of an English identity or lack of British identity. How important is it? Well, again, it's really to that individual, and that's an argument you have to make. Remember, I think a lot of this stuff is just how you would base that argument. And certain identities to people are who they are, how they see themselves. Right, yeah, so there's local, regional, and national. For example, Liverpool supporter and an England supporter, which is national. Regional as well, you can be like, well, I'm a Geordie, I'm not Geordie, or you might say Scouse, and Englishman as well. So you've got the North, I'm a Northerner or a Southerner, a Glaswegian, Cornish, and then the stereotypical representations of that. For example, Scousers have always had that negative stereotype of thieves, which is nonsense. Okay, another level of regionalism, again, split into Midlands, Northeast, Northwest, that kind of thing. Expression of national identity, you've got the Braveheart, the Highlander, you've got the Englishman with the St. George's Cross, the Irish leprechaun, etc. National identity, pretty straightforward. Patriotism, that just means you love your country, you're proud of your country. Right, then we've got many things that granted that make up the British way of life, how population is changing. Again, I'm not going to go through that. You can read it to have a little look. But that's just the history of migration in this country. You've got the influx of the upper class Normans in 1066. You've got the French Huguenots that come over in the Elizabethan period. You've got the 19th century, the growth of empire and bringing countries in. So migration, immigration to the country is forever in flux. The more we connect with the world, the more immigration is going to be. Right, people come to the UK, so you might have a question about reasons for immigration. A lot of it can be jobs. So you've got economic migrants, people coming for work, people come for money, better life. Others are come across because they're being persecuted or to avoid war. Differences, again, you should all know that, but I'll leave it on there for you to just read and copy down. Right. So many UK citizens have gone to live in other countries. So this is a lot of them migrating out. Scots were forced to leave the Highlands during the clearances. So many Scots go to the USA, Canada, Australia. Brits living in the EU. That had a big impact with Brexit. So just keep an eye of why people leave this country, as well as why people come into it. I skipped over that. Net migration is basically like the numbers who leave this country, so the numbers of Brits who migrate out, and then those who immigrate in, you calculate the score. Advantages and disadvantages, lovely table there. Please make a note, because that's a big question that they like to ask. What are the advantages or disadvantages of immigration? Again, more skilled work, migrants more prepared to take low paid, low skilled jobs. Economic gain, support of the NHS, being more diverse, increased political ties with their country of origin. Disadvantages, population growth outstripping like housing, for instance. Rise of unemployment, people blame immigrants for taking jobs. Farms and factories, needing cheap labour, etc. Right, and then you got asylum seeker, refugee. So basically, the difference is an asylum seeker is somebody who's waiting for the application, refugee who's already got it. Right, the media. Big question on this one as well. The media. So different types: e-media, internet. Traditional media is newspapers, television. New media, social media, which is social media, and mass media, which communicates to a large number. Okay, definition of media: basically communicating information. It's one of the big things in history to control the populace. 95% of adults say they followed the news in 2014. Television is the most used platform, but 41% now use the internet. That statistic might even increase now. I'm not sure how outdated those statistics are, but you look at your age group and those above, they are constantly consuming more content on the news. The amount of times I get kids say, "Sir, this happened because I read it on TikTok." This TikToker says this. So again, please be aware of that. Different types of messages. So you've got documentaries, music, advertisements. You've got carried on different media types. Some have different approaches. What are the roles? To inform, educate, to be open, raise awareness, promote free-flowing ideas, make citizens aware of their rights, for example. Certain media outlets have targets. So, you've got readers that want in-depth views would look at Daily Telegraph and the Times, like really thorough newspapers. Readers that want lots of news but are easy to read may look to the Daily Mail. Readers want like sensationalism. Those who do media as well as this might have an advantage here, because you can look at things like the Sun, that trash newspaper. Right, pros and cons. Again, categorize what's good about the media, what's bad. Think about manipulation. Think about a media can really get the media can really get that message out there, but they can also have a lot of power with that. They can manipulate and influence. Okay, hate crimes as well. Just keep an idea. It's normally people targeting a group, particularly based on who they are, sexual orientation, religious orientation, etc. So there's arguments about lack of mutual respect and tolerance. This can also link to immigration. People become increasingly unhappy with immigrants coming to this country, losing British identity, and that leads to a pushback and violence and racist incidences. Anger and tolerance are the enemies of correct understanding. Mahatma Gandhi, very famous for the peaceful protest. Although he wasn't exactly tolerant of the people of Ghana. Right. So, ideas of freedom of speech against censorship. Make sure you know these terms. free press, open, democratic, is another one of our checks and balances. Allows the press to communicate and express ideas to us. Press regulation, you need to know IPSO and Impress, right? We'll get onto them, but make sure you look at them. You've got detailed descriptions of those in your revision guides. Right, so Television UK is governed by legislation. One way in which the BBC participates in politics is to air political broadcasts. Other media platforms aren't quite regulated as well. So that's the problem with social media. People think, it can spread too much fake news, whereas traditional newspaper is regulated, so they get punished if they spread fake news. Like social media, not so much. So. Like this is an example, Jeremy Corbyn dancing his way into Remembrance Day at the Cenotaph. When a newspaper crops out a veteran on Remembrance Sunday so they can accuse opponent of disrespect. Sometimes they have an agenda, so one traditional newspaper might lean towards a political party because it supports their business plan. In 2009, Daily Telegraph published information about the expenses claims made by members of Parliament. Police refused to investigate. So again, just have a look at these little stories, these case studies. They are helpful. I mean, you can bring in your own, but they're there for you. Okay, body of dead refugee child being removed from a beach in Turkey. This is tragic scenes. Again, I'll just leave these up for you to kind of read for yourself, just so we can move through this, and it's not going to take hours for me to upload. Yeah, just a little bit of story about her. They hacked the voicemail of Millie Dowler's phone. This will lead to the Leveson inquiry. So the editor's jailed because it's invasion of privacy. They want to investigate issues with phone hacking, and this is where you get the regulation and censorship really stepping up. So you might see Piers Morgan sometimes linked to this, but he also says he was never part of it. But in 2011, the News of the World newspaper ceased publication following the allegations that many of its reporters and editors were being involved in hacking people's phones for information that would then provide stories to the newspapers. The government set up the Leveson inquiry and the press following this. Then the recommendations were made. So make sure you follow that inquiry and make sure you're aware of it. So you've got the IPSO, the Independent Press Standards Organisation, set up in 2014 by the newspaper industry, handles complaints, conducts investigations, power to require published corrections. So it's just a check and balance on that media. Then Impress, you need to know the difference between the two. Impress is the government-appointed press regulator. It's got a complaint system that the public can use. Most newspapers, though, belong to IPSO because they don't like to be regulated by the government. But Impress does provide better legal safeguards. Right, it's an idea of, did the Leveson inquiry go far enough? Newspaper industry should continue to self-regulate. Government should not try to control what papers publish. Again, all press complaints commission was not fit for purpose. New bodies should be established to promote high standards. New bodies should be established by the industry with new code of conduct. New bodies should be backed up by legislation designed to ensure that the new body was doing its work properly. Okay, so is it better for the government to pass laws controlling the media or for the media to regulate itself? That's the age-old question, because it's like, how much power can we give the media? You might be thinking, well, obviously, sir, we need the press to be free. That's part of our democracy. However, what happens when you get a powerful press? What happens when you get a media tycoon who can then manipulate the people for his own agenda? Then power transfers, let's say, from the government body to this independent private individual, which is problematic. So you need that balance between the two. Why does, again, protects the public, respects people's privacy? You can't just have the press sticking their camera through your window. Gives the public confidence that complaints will be dealt with, so we can, you can't just write what you want. You can't just disparage somebody in that way. So IPSO, press now established a regulator outside charter arrangements. Again, handles complaints. I've already looked at that. IPSO looks at complaints in relation to editors' code of practice, which is the ethical code. Again, make a note of some of these. You will need to know them. why the government should allow the media to regulate itself, right? So no freedom of speech, not allowing people to have their own opinion. So right, yeah. So it means they can put opinion pieces out there against the government. Lead to banning broadcasts. Leads to government-funded and controlled broadcasts. So this is saying, like, if the government uh, regulates the media, this is what can happen. You have examples of this in China and Russia where they have absolute control, and it shuts down the voice of the people. Yeah, and then we'll look at the power of the countries. Where it's all about money. Money leads to power. World power, basically a country that has influence in international affairs. Yes, UK is still part of that, even though it's nowhere near the level it used to be, and nowhere near countries like China and America. So it first applied to Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union following World War One, but UK's world power has diminished since the loss of the empire. It was really about United States and Soviet Union in the Cold War. After the Soviet Union broke apart, mainly looked at the United States, but China's massive economic rise has led to China being seen as an important player. The EU, India's growing influence as well. Right. So what international organisations do we have? Well, we've got the WTO, World Trade Organization, the United Nations. We've got the European Union. We've got the Council of Europe. So these we've got NATO. So what is the United Nations and why was it created? Well, basically it's created post Second World War. It's really like the 2.0 League of Nations for those historians out there who know it from our Germany topic. The United Nations basically replaces League of Nations as a much more important body to stop the horrors of things like the Holocaust. What are the aims? Basically solve international conflicts and prevent wars. They're doing really, really well at the moment. Who runs the UN? How does it work? Well, basically, you have the member states. You have key 5 states, which are Great Britain, America, Russia, France, and China. I think I might have to come back to you on that. Structure: each part works on different aims. So the principal charter there: safeguard peace, security, reaffirm faith in human rights, uphold respect for international law, promote social progress, and better standards for life. So it's interesting that Russia is a member state in that, considering what they're doing at the moment. Here we go. So the 5 permanent members. They meet and discuss issues that affect the security of the whole world. General Assembly debate and discussion between all 193 member states that have joined. They've got the Secretariat, who's the leader. They've got economic levels and the Court of Justice, where legal disputes will be submitted. The power of veto, however, the power of the President to refuse to approve a bill or joint resolution and thus prevent the enactment into law is the veto. The President has 10 days, but a member state can also veto a proposal. So this is an example of Russia. So they invaded Ukraine, stole part of the country, claimed people who lived in Crimea wanted to be Russian. The UN Council met to discuss the unlawful invasion. Guess what Russia did? They vetoed it. Guess what Russia did recently when they invaded Ukraine? Vetoed the issue that was brought to the UN, making it redundant. This is the biggest weakness of the United Nations. Okay, so United Nations basically replace League of Nations. They are aim of preventing further war. You've got the WTO, deals with rules of global trade. Council of Europe, basically they are linked to human rights. So every time you think human rights, linked to Council of Europe. Commonwealth, basically ex-British Empire, all countries who kind of partner up to deal in trade and democracy. And NATO, that military alliance that was really created against the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union. Right, yeah, so, yeah. You guys can have a look at that. I'm not going to go through that. Just pause it and read it. It's in your revision guides, to be honest. We need to look at the effectiveness of the UN in international issues. So, you got civil war in Liberia. You got the UN establishing peacekeeping missions to go in and control it and sort it out. They did help supply fresh water as well as renovating schools and health centres. NATO the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, basically political and militarily promotes democratic values. It's like a safety net. It's like a protective device. Militarily, they are basically committed to each other. This is why if Russia, let's say, attacked a member state like Poland, that would set off a sequence of events that would lead to probably World War III, because the UK and every other NATO member state is bound to protect Poland under NATO, and it's why kind of Russia maybe attacked Ukraine as early as they did, because Ukraine were considering joining NATO, so they probably wanted to get Ukraine before they did. Again, collective defense, transatlantic link. Again, you can read them, discuss them anyway. Decision making, so expression of collective will of all 30 member countries, since all decisions are taken by consensus. So UK is a key member of NATO, one of the organisation's founding members back in 1849. Again, you can have a little bit of a read of how they responded to Russia and Ukraine. I'm not going to go through that. And again, you've got Kosovo case study. Again, you can just pause that and read that. So crisis management operations, just as we're finishing off, about 18,000 military personnel engaged in missions around the world. They're operating in Afghanistan, Kosovo, the Mediterranean. It supports the African Union. Definitely little things NATO do. So just be aware if you get a question based on that. And lastly, how do you get involved in conflict? Remember, you've got soft power and hard power. Hard power is the use of force and sanctions, and soft power is the mediation. So please read through them. You need to know them. And we'll finish there. Right, 21 minutes to cover the entirety of life in modern Britain. Remember to use this alongside revision guide. I'll get up rights and responsibilities, hopefully just as quick.